Everyone, welcome to another episode of Mehnaz Talks AI. I'm your host, Mehnaz Tabassum, and today I'm beyond thrilled to be joined by someone who not only understands the mechanics of global leadership, but also leads with deep purpose. Pierre Le Manh, the president and CEO of Project Management Institute. Pierre, first, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
You pronounce it very well.
And it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. And let's start by talking about your roots. I was sharing with Pierre that I'm right now in Da Nang, Vietnam, and it's been really incredible. And Pierre, you have spoken quite openly about, being raised by a Vietnamese father and a French mother. So you already have multicultural since you were born. So, with your multicultural background, how has your upbringing influenced your leadership style and your approach to transformation?
First of all, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it's a pleasure to know that you're interviewing me from Da Nang. It's beautiful. The first time I went to Da Nang was in 30 years ago, and at the time was still a very preserved city. It was a military base for the U.S. Back in the days during the war. And there's this massive beach there that is beautiful, China Beach, that the Americans used to go to, right? And I remember swimming there. It was still very, very preserved. It is now different. Da Nang has been developing enormously with so many resorts. It is on the verge of being a Vietnamese Cancun or something like that. Although I would say it is still more high-end and a little bit more pure. But Vietnam has changed a lot in the last 30 years for sure. So you're right, I was raised by a Vietnamese father. My name is actually a Vietnamese name. Most people believe it's a French name, but it's not. It's a Vietnamese name. Vietnamese people know. Like when they see it, they ask me right away, oh, you have a Vietnamese name. But so I was raised by a Vietnamese father, French mother in Paris. And that was, for many years, I never realized how this has influenced me or shaped me. As you said, it only came later when I started to realize that I had certain aptitudes that I then attributed to my upbringing in a bicultural family. In particular, when you have two parents who have a totally different culture, and it's the case of my parents, obviously, my dad grew up in Vietnam. He came only when he was in his 20s, met with my mom, married my mom, and that's how today, many years later, interviewed by you. So I had this aptitude of understanding people who have totally different cultures without even realizing that. When I was a child, most of what I was doing between my parents is to translate what my dad was saying to my mom and what my mom was saying to my dad. Not a language problem, it was all in French, but more what my dad meant that my mom, I felt, pretended not to understand. I think she actually did not fully understand, and still to this day, they're still together, 91, 87. But you develop this almost intuitive ability to translate from one way of thinking to the other and back. And that helped. It helped me then in life. I have a very big family. My dad, on his side, I have 51 first cousins. They're spread across all continents, some of them in Vietnam, some of them in the US, some of them in France, some of them in the UK, some of them in Australia. I just visited them 2 weeks ago when I was there for work. And I worked in different countries, different environments. I worked in Canada for a while. I worked in the UK. I worked in Italy. And I learned as I was doing that multiple languages. So it has definitely given me the taste for the unknown, for the curiosity of discovering new cultures, new ways of working, new ways of living. And the outcome of all of that for me is that you don't want to eradicate differences. The richness is in the diversity of cultures, backgrounds, knowledge, upbringing, experiences. And if you can leverage these differences that people have instead, and even leverage the differences you have in your own upbringing, culture, experience, then it's much stronger than trying to eradicate all differences and have everyone formatted in the same way for the sake of, let's say, harmonization or consistency. Those things matter, consistency, harmonization sometimes, but when it comes to people, it is much better to try to build teams and an environment where the uniqueness of each individual is going to be nurtured and leveraged as best as we can.
No, I think you're completely right. And that's something that I see as well. And that's why I was so excited to talk to you because I too, in my day-to-day work, I am visiting in different countries, like doing keynotes and workshop. And I think the best part is every time I'm in a different country, the richness of the culture and the people and the kindness. Like as an example, today I was trying to find a co-working space where I can work from because right now it's almost 2 a.m. in Vietnam.
Yeah,
So I had a hard time finding a cafe that was open where I had a good background, like more quiet. So I came to this workspace that closes, supposed to be closing at 10 p.m. And I told them that I had this interview with you and I have few meetings. Not knowing who you are, I just told them like few interviews. I need a quiet space. And the owner actually gave me permission to work here entire night. So right now I'm at a cafe where there's no one else. It's closed. I always find it's incredible if you can connect with someone and really communicate and the relationship and what can come out of it, right? Like it was a great start to my day or night.
wonderful. And sorry to have you so late, actually.
No, I work in EST time, so that's that.
Okay,
But coming back to the, like talking about change and interconnectivity, PMI, it's a global organization. And since you have kind of taken leadership, I think back in 2022, if I'm not mistaken,
that's right.
what has really surprised you about the global project management community? Especially how fast right now things are changing.
When I joined PMI, I joined because I thought I could help, and in particular, help scaling PMI to a different level to become more global. We're still very US centric in many ways, although we had presence already in multiple markets and countries in the world, especially through our chapters, but still very US centric in its thinking, culture, processes, ideas. And I thought I could also help rejuvenate the brand, which needed this a little bit. So that's why I joined. I only joined at this stage of my career a company, especially as a CEO, if I think I can really make a difference, help the organization that I'm going to join. But in fact, what really surprised me, and I had completely underestimated that, is the strength of PMI is truly its community, right? It's a very community-centered organization. And I did not think of PMI that way when I joined, in spite of my contacts with the board and all the things that I heard about PMI. I did not expect it to be as much as or as strongly a community-centered organization before the products, the services, and everything that any company has, right? Products, services, prices,
Mm-hmm.
clients, whatever you want to call it. But the community is really at the center of all of that. And so that surprised me. And the passion that goes with it, that is sometimes almost extreme,
Mm-hmm.
most often in a good way, sometimes even too much. And people are giving so much of their passion and personal commitment and engagement to PMI that it almost scares me sometimes. I feel like, okay, you gotta
I know.
you can't be so emotionally dependent and connected. But it's great as well to see that. We have about 15,000 volunteers, people who every year spend some time volunteering for PMI in any capacity. Could be by being experts in some areas, helping us develop courses,
Mhm.
certifications, like participate to some of our commissions, or even be part of the PMI structure of volunteers, our chapters, or even our global volunteering opportunities, mentoring regions, all of that.
Mhm.
And so we have all these people who are so passionate and committed. They're the first advocates of PMI. They're also demanding, of course, but they are so helpful and we owe them. So I really felt this was different and way more than what I was expecting. And in return, I really want to give them the confidence to be successful, confidence about what project management can bring to the world and how they personally can contribute even more than they have so far. And that's really driving a lot of the excitement I have every day
Mhm.
when I start working. I don't really go to an office, right? I go all around the world and I work from home like everybody else at PMI because we're a fully remote organization, except in a couple of countries. But whenever I turn on my computer in the morning or my phone or whatever I do first, usually my phone, I get the same excitement because I know that what we're doing is going to be valuable if we're doing a good job for this very passionate community.
I mean, I can, like, the entire time you're talking, I had this big smile on my face because I could so much relate. I don't know if I shared this with you already, but the first time I came across PMI chapter, in my own community was I was asked to become a keynote speaker at one of their events, sharing my own project management institute. So I go there, I take on the stage, I share my expertise and whatnot. But somehow in 6 months, I find myself to be a vice president. Of the chapter. And I feel like the draw from going there as a speaker to taking on that leadership role was community. At that point, I had so much going on in my life, but I just felt this deep pull from the PMI community that this is something that I want to be a part of. And I've spoken to a lot of other volunteers and leaders, and that's like a magical thing that PMI has built kind of globally that like you go to an event or you go to a networking thing or you may be talking to someone through a mentorship session and then the next day you will be like, okay, I want to also give back and contribute and be a part of it. That's really incredible.
Yeah, exactly. What is your chapter, by the way?
I was a VP for PMI Ottawa Valley, Ottawa's.
Yeah,
Yes.
one of our large chapters, definitely. Not the largest, but quite significant.
Quite significant in Canada, yes. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about AI and how it's reshaping industries we know. And sometimes even I have a hard time fully keep track of all the, new trends, tools, news. And for my own journey, like I have seen how AI has taken over the administrative task in different project flows, but it also leaves a lot of room for strategy and creativity. And I feel like that's where the project manager role is evolving to be more strategic and more creative and more human centered, I would say. So, what do you think about the role of project manager that is evolving in this era of AI and automation?
Yeah, the explosion of AI in our space has generated quite a bit of anxiety, of course. Especially initially, people thought 80% of our jobs would be gone soon. We had all these predictions, doomsday kind of predictions. And I think even beyond that, there is this feeling that the role of the human beings, at least in the knowledge economy, is being questioned, where it's not very clear in the end, why do we need us if machines can do a better job than us? There was for a while this idea that creativity will stay with humans, but we all realize that ChatGPT, for instance, is helping us create, gives us ideas. We can ask it to draw something. So we realize that it's actually a pretty creative tool and sometimes not reliable. So it has all the characteristics of human beings. It can be lazy, it can forget a lot. So that anxiety, I think, is what drives a lot of the reaction or behavior that people have with AI. And it's kind of normal, to sometimes for humanity to be put back in this situation of wondering if what we've always believed is actually true. So when Galileo discovered that the Earth was not the center of the universe, we're not even the center of the solar system, and therefore the humans were not at the center of the universe, right? Same thing. That was a very disturbing thought. We survived it. When Darwin discovered that we were not necessarily created, shaped by the will of God, or not directly at least, but we are the product of an evolution that in fact makes us one other animal, that was a very disturbing thought. We also got over it. And when Freud discovered that many of our actions are not very rational, but driven by pulsions that may not be very easy to admit, that also got us to really think we're not a fully rational living organism. That's weird, etc. Right? You could add Einstein and others. So we've been able to overcome all of that, but once more we're facing this weird moment when knowledge, which we thought was unique to humans, and the thinking that comes with knowledge is actually replicated by a machine in a fairly impressive way already, and it's nothing compared to what it's going to be in 20, 50 years. Whatever it is, it seems far, but it's short, right? So I think it is important that we really reflect on the role that humans will still keep, right? And I got my own theory around that, that I call the AOC theory, not per the representative of New York, but it's also a trigram that is used in France for wines, right? It means like it's a labeled wine. Anyway, so AOC stands for accountability, ownership, and choice. Where I feel one thing that will not go away is the accountability. So I can, as a CEO, use AI. Maybe AI is going to do my job very well, but one thing that AI won't do is being accountable. So in the end, it is my accountability to use or not use AI, to use the output of AI or not. All of that is my responsibility. I'm accountable for it. But with accountability comes ownership. Like you don't want your surgeon to be accountable but be a bad surgeon. You want the surgeon to also be good because they own what they're doing. They see the outcome of what they do as a reflection of who they are and what they stand for, right? So they want to be good at that. And for that, you need to give people purpose. Like they need to understand why they're doing what they're doing or not. And then with all of that comes the concept of choice a bit, which is where, you need to leave people the ability to decide how they can best contribute. We would be in a world where for many people, there would be less need of working if things go as we think. Like if AI becomes so clever that it can innovate and invent a lot of solutions that will resolve many of our problems and then create the problem of what is a human going to stand for. But if that happens, then it would be a lot about choice. You need to let people decide how they can best contribute to society at large, whatever it's going to be looking like. So, I really think we have to evolve from believing that knowledge is everything to being is everything, right? So knowledge can be delegated to a machine that is our extension. It doesn't mean we should know nothing, but we'll have a lot of fluidity between us and the machine for the knowledge side, but who we are, what we stand for, how we contribute, the choices we make, our sense of ownership, of accountability, all of that will stay, right? So it's very important that we have this in mind. And if we have this in mind, then we should be optimistic about AI. And at PMI, we are definitely optimistic. We have created this initiative, launched that initiative very early on called PMI by AI, where on one side we want to lead the AI transformation of project management. So how do you leverage AI in your day-to-day job? And on the other hand, leading the project management of AI transformation. So equipping project professionals all across the world so that they're able to manage AI related projects or AI implementation projects in the right way. With all the things that it implies in terms of data, understanding of the ethics or ethical components of that, data governance, understanding the interface between the human and the machine, thinking of all of that so you're better at leading such projects.
Now that's good. And I think that's where, like you said, that's where it's headed because with the knowledge stream, the machines can kind of think for you right now. It can generate ideas, it can give you that knowledge base, but it won't be able to do the accountability or choices and also like do the thinking for you because I feel like ultimately right now where because I run a consultancy firm where we support small businesses and charities with their work. And one of the things that I consistently notice with CEOs or with even teams is to even decide that what do they want to do with the AI? Like, how do we get the best out of? So I feel like that's where we are kind of going to be evolving because the tools and technologies, it's going to be there, it's going to shape but how do you utilize it in an ethical manner with accountability and get the best output? I feel like that's where we will see like people's skill set and will be tested in the long run. That's just how I feel. So if we talk about a little bit more into kind of, AI still meet again, as I said, through my consultancy, like a lot of CEOs, especially project managers or leaders who are still fearful of the AI tool. So how do we get them to move from fear to a point of trust? Because it is still new. There are so much that we still don't know. So how do we begin seeing AI more of a collaborative partner, like that it's empowering us in delivering the impact rather than like fearing the tool itself?
What we're seeing from our research is that the more people use AI, the more comfortable they become using AI, which is like it sounds very logical and it also, it is something that we've experienced with a lot of things, right? The more you use it, the more comfortable you become, the more you can generate impact, right? So initially what you do is mostly automating very simple tasks, taking your minutes, correcting an email, doing things like that. And then progressively you start learning use cases that are more advanced. We launched that course this year where actually maybe end of last year called Practical Use Cases for AI. It's this free course for all our members and very low, moderate price for others. It's, I think $19. I really encourage you to take this. It shows you multiple cases where once you've mastered the basics, and we have courses for the basics. We have an intro course for generative AI applied to project management. We have a prompt engineering course, so you can learn how to do that if you have not already been doing this for a while, because I feel like everybody is talking to AI these days, but it's not necessarily the case. And then you can start like using it for more complex tasks, understand how you upload your documents, how you populate them. You can use it for building teams, searching for you, writing job desks, but also filtering CVs, all of that, or your company's teammates to make sure that you design training programs for them to make up for certain skills that they may not have, how you can use it to anticipate risks in a very smart way. It can do that, all of that for you if you know how to do it. And progressively, I think the more you would use it, the more you would understand that this can be used, and that yes, the AI is definitely not always reliable. It has as hallucination, but if you start thinking of AI as a human being, then you won't be as bothered and worried as you may be now. Like, we are so used to see machines as tools that cannot make mistakes. It's very uncomfortable and disturbing for us to think that the machine can make a mistake, right? Because we've been used to have machines to automate tasks without mistakes. Now you're seeing generative AI, it's different. They have the same defaults or defects as human beings, right? They make mistakes, biased, and you gotta be careful with how you interact with them if you don't want to influence them either, right? But once you understand that, then you realize that AI is going to do the work, a lot of your work, better than you would, and definitely so much faster.
Mm-hmm.
That you know how to use it and how to not use it. And if something cannot afford any mistake, especially with data that are facts, then you will check that and make sure that the generative AI or the LLM that you use will use the right data in entry. But for other things, do things that are already very impactful from day one. Changing the tone of your email, if you explain more things about your stakeholder, and then you understand that if you maybe download 10 emails that you've had in the past with that specific stakeholder
It's
and
gonna
give it as an
learn.
input, then the LLM will adjust to that. You very quickly, like in one day, you start understanding how to have a lot of impact or increase your impact thanks to generative AI.
And like I agree, and I can again very much relate because one of the things that I personally feel like AI has helped me in my own career and in my own journey is that I was also born as someone who wanted to do a lot of diverse things. I wanted to volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
I was working with the government and so many different roles. And I always felt like I wanted to do more, but there's only so much time in the day that allowed me to do more and follow my diverse passion. But ever since with the right AI tools, like I have been able to do a lot, get like my productivity, being able to volunteer with so many organizations, being able to teach, do workshops, still work at corporates. I've been able to do quite a lot. Even like this podcast, I was sitting on it for so long, but because of AI and like process automation, like it takes so much less to do, like get things done. So that's how I have been using AI a lot in my day to day. But one thing that I am still personally focusing on, and I feel like PMI has been focusing on a lot. And even when I was working with the PMI chapter, we were also focusing on that one thing, which is upskilling and how do we get people to really hone in on some of their skills so they can also maximize their own potential. So, from your perspective, what skills will define the next generation of project change maker or global leaders, if you want to call them?
Yeah, I think it's a very relevant question, especially in the light of AI automating a lot of the executional tasks that project
Mm-hmm.
managers have thought were part of their jobs or that everybody thinks is part of their jobs. So, in other words, it will elevate the floor, right? AI is going to make sure that the minimal quality of project management would be there almost regardless of the quality of the project professional, because a lot of things are done properly. Like now, these days, there's no more excuse for writing an email that is not clear because everybody, like, and all the young people I know, they're all asking ChatGPT or whatever tool they use, Claude or others to, or Gemini, to correct their emails, and so the floor is going to be raised. The question is, how do you now elevate your own ceiling, right, to avoid being squeezed and be made irrelevant because you're doing the same thing as AI but not as good as AI. In that case, for sure, there will be
Yeah.
some issues. So at PMI, we've really tried, and in light of our purpose as well, which is maximizing project success to elevate our world, we've really tried to think about how can project professionals increase chances, the likelihood of a project to be successful. And by project being successful, we don't mean the project management to be successful. We're talking about the outcome of the project itself. And we came up with this framework that we call MORE, MORE, with what we believe are the fundamental improvements or changes or upskilling that we need our project professionals or our community to go through. The first one is manage perceptions. It is the ability to manage the perception of stakeholders. By this, I mean, could be your bosses for sure, the C-suite, but most importantly, or more importantly, customers, consumers, shareholders, stakeholders of all kinds, the communities you serve. Because in the end, if they see the outcome of the project as a failure, then it doesn't matter so much whether your project management was proper or not. You will always be associated with that failure. And it also goes the other way around. So even if there are some issues with the way the execution was led, in the end, if people believe that the value that is created was worth the resources that were engaged, the cost, the people, whatever impact it can have on the environment, etc. So if it's worth it, then people will still associate you as a project professional to the success. So it's very important to manage this perception. The second is this concept of owning project success beyond project management success. Not to say that project management done properly, defined by the triple constraints of scope, schedule, and budget. Not to say that this doesn't matter, this still matters a lot, but going beyond that and really owning that project success, which sometimes takes time to materialize, right? So it's not very comfortable, but it is important that you have this mentality and thinking. R stands for reassessing the project parameters relentlessly, as we say. So it is to not stick too much to predefined objectives necessarily, or go beyond the predefined design at least, and make sure that a mandate is there to guide you, to help you, but you have to constantly reassess whether that mandate delivers the value worth the resources that are engaged that your end stakeholders will expect. And then finally, the E stands for broadening your perspective. So embrace a broader perspective, enlarge your perspective. And that by that, we mean really making sure that project professionals understand the business that they work for. What are the goals that we are trying to accomplish here beyond the simple, almost discrete element of your project, right? What is the continuum in which you operate? What is the end goal of all of that? So expand your perspective. And we feel that if you can deliver on more, which is, again, uncomfortable sometimes because it means accepting that perception is reality. It can be, we have metrics that we have been used to always measure our performance, but there are also things that are not really, are more intangible and that are not fully under our control, right? So we have to accept that things that are not under our control may be things that we're still accountable for in the end. That's uncomfortable, but very understandable by the C-suite or CEOs, because this is what the CEO does every single day, being accountable for things that is not fully under their control. But that's okay. We have to live with that. So it's uncomfortable. It's also different a bit depending on the type of project. If you work on an internal project in IT, you have more ability to do more than if you work on a government contract where you have lots of constraints. But even there, our community working for governments are really constantly looking for ways to improve the final outcome regardless of the initial design. So it is important, even if it's harder for them to do it, that at least they have this mind shift or mindset.
No, that's 100% right. And it's great that you brought like the government, because I was working with the government for over 10 years managing projects. I know very well the constraint we have to work with, but I also know the opportunities that exist and how better we can still apply the project management principles and still create this impact within those constraints. And one of the tools that I have been using extensively when I was working with the government, plus even now in my day to day, is PMI Infinity. So that's kind of one of my favorite tools because, again, I have studied the project management. I have like got my PMP, but I don't remember like word by word, and I don't feel like I need to. So with PM Infinity, I'm able to reflect quickly anytime I need. Like, so the knowledge base is feel like at my fingertip. And one thing that I'm starting to teach younger PMs or aspiring PMs is how do you use PMI to educate yourself to be a better project manager? Because I feel like that's a use case that not everyone is using right now. It's like use PMI to learn project management concept and principles and prep for the PMP course or the CAPM course. And it's one of the most exciting tools I think PMI has launched. So can you tell a little bit story behind this development and how do you envision it's transforming the way that project professionals access knowledge and support in real time?
Yeah, it's look when we had this explosion of generative AI, right? I think it was at the end of 2022, beginning of 2023. We thought at PMI that it was a no-brainer for us to leverage this so that the access to our knowledge, right, is made easier for project professionals. And one of the things we do at PMI, so we do, of course, certification. We have the gold standard certification. You mentioned some of them, PMP in particular, CAPM and others. We have learning and development career long. So it includes courses, e-learning, but also, of course, the volunteering experiences that you mentioned and that you had yourself with your chapter in Ottawa. And then we have what we call community-based knowledge platforms, right? So they are basically, it's knowledge, right, that is vetted by our community, created by our community of experts, and that we nurture, that we curate as PMI. It was, of course, so how do we share that knowledge, right? Could be through books, publications. The PMBOK is an example of that. Could be through events, could be through webinars, and we do all of that. But of course, creating our own platform that leverages OpenAI, structure, LLMs, etc., but put it on our own instance with content that is vetted by PMI. So I think we have 14,000 pieces of content that came from PMI. And then progressively we add other content that is either generated by our community real time or content that we have vetted through our work, right? So we partner with other organizations. Some of them, by the way, since then have joined the PMI family, like Agile Alliance, GPM, etc., Green Project Management. So we make sure that the content that is out there is reliable, so that we have a real safe copilot for project professionals that they can use to do their jobs. So in part to learn, but also to do their jobs. You can upload your document, get a project charter written. You can do a lot of things now using Infinity. And we have, of course, a big roadmap. We will extend it to multiple LLMs by the end of the year. We start, at least by the end of the year, like at least one more LLM. We'll have a corporate version that is completely safe to use, seen from the IT of your companies. It will be on mobile. It will be optimized to minimize the consumption of electricity compared to, for instance, ChatGPT. So there's a lot of things we can do to make this tool the best for product professionals. For us, it was really, again, an obvious move when we had the start of this explosion of LLMs usage for product professionals. We considered making an acquisition at the time, and then we challenged our tech team, and they actually were very happy to meet this challenge to develop a tool in 90 days. I think at the time we said develop an MVP in 90 days, and they launched after 4 months, right? So after 4 months, we had a tool, the first version of Infinity, and we've seen since then, so now we are at version 2, version 3 is coming at the end of the year, and we've seen a constant increase of the usage, number of people who use it, and how many times they come back, and how many prompts, etc. All those KPIs are going up. It's a tool that is free for our members. It's not yet open for non-members, but it will be at one point, of course, for a fee.
No, that's really good. And that's honestly one of my favorite things about your work. And I really love how you always advocate for is innovation with purpose. And right now in this world, especially project management in general, from my experience, I found that yes, it's really great for work and it's a career building. And, I can even go ahead and say that this is a skill that's relevant from at all levels, all industries, all domains. Even if you're a CEO, you need the skills. But I feel like for my experience, at least, the project management mindset and the methodologies have applied to my real life as well. Like I applied to my day to day. It has really become like a core value and the way I think, and it has really helped me a lot. So based on your experience, how do people manage, the push or the need for KPIs, but also while building something that truly matters? So that balance.
Yeah, it's like for me, so I think your question is about the need for short-term performance versus the focus on the long-term purpose, right? And how do many CEOs complain that they're focused on the quarterly results and they can't have any long-term strategy. First of all, part of that is, in my opinion, a self-limitation.
Mm-hmm.
What I've learned, and I've worked honestly, and I've run companies in multiple forms of governance, right now a nonprofit, but I was also, before I was the CEO of a listed company at one point, a private equity-backed company, also was the CEO of a family-owned company. So you've got different kind of governances, and yes, there are differences. Definitely, if you run a nonprofit, it's easier to move from let's say, the unique focus on the profit to a broader, people, purpose, of course, profit and planet kind of thinking, right? The 4 Ps. But even when you run a listed company, for instance, your narrative, your ability to communicate a long-term purpose and vision, and then that way rally investors behind you, which for many of them are people from the public, rally your employees around you. So this level of transparency in your goals is also extremely important. And you see many CEOs of public companies talk a lot about purpose and long term. It doesn't mean that they only do that. It doesn't mean that I only do that. We also have to make sure that every single dollar that we spend is well spent. And I'm doing a lot of that. And we have a lot of operational issues to deal with, like e-commerce, payments, product launches, reducing our cycles. And, all of that is exactly the same. Our marketing, our brand, our platforms, my day to day is not different today than it was when I was running a public company or a PE-backed company or a family-owned company. It's not really different. But it's true that understanding that those goals are not mutually exclusive, that performance actually gives you the resources you need to transform your organization, and that transformation has to be done with a long-term purpose in mind. Right? Because performance doesn't motivate people, in itself. I tried that when I was younger. Let's be the largest company in our area or the most profitable company. That's even worse. Like, people don't care so much. They might care a bit about their bonuses, things like that, but people are rarely driven by money only. It comes as a secondary, for most people, right? As a secondary objective. The first one is still to do something meaningful, where you work with people that you like, you have the impression of building something, understand why you're doing what you're doing, right? So that's what you have to do as a CEO. And to me, if you do that at the same time as you focus on your short-term performance, but understanding that the short-term performance is what enables the long-term purpose, then I think it works pretty well.
No, you have said it absolutely right. And with that, we are actually coming to the close of this. It's been pleasure talking to you, but I want to close off with a very impactful question. So if you are kind of sitting across a young leader, maybe like a newcomer to US or Canada or anywhere, like I was a few years ago, what advice would you give them that would help them navigate their fear and enter this, new landscape with boldness?
So there's a ton of things that could apply to individuals in particular. So I cannot necessarily give you an advice without knowing you. But one thing that I know, and that I've experienced myself as well, the one thing that hampers success, that drags you down, is the lack of confidence, right? So you have to work on building your self-confidence. And there are things that, if there are things that you don't feel confident about, think harder about how to address that. Because if you leave it unaddressed, this lack of confidence is going to hamper your ability to fulfill your potential. And even people who have immense potential, immense talent, in the eyes of everybody else, are not immune to a lack of confidence. If anything, high achievers have a slightly higher problem of self-confidence than others. They don't necessarily show it, but they do. So if you don't show it, but you have it, you have to address it. And I would say, as you grow older and more mature, like you have more experience now, you have to help others discover their abilities and build confidence for life, right? Because it's hard to do this on your own. So help others, and these others will one day help others. And that's how I think how we can leave a mark. And I hope the people who have worked with me in the past, all these years, can say that I did help them a little.
That's amazing. I love it and I can resonate with it. That's actually what got me into teaching as well. Thank you so much, Pierre. Like, your insights are not just only timely, it's timeless. And I
Thank you.
think what
That's a nice,
I have
I will
really,
steal
really,
that from you.
and I really loved the most about this conversation is like how much I could resonate with you. And, like I could always resonate with the project management community, the family. Like, I feel like it's incredible, like how much this organization has done. Like, every country I have visited, there's someone who knows, like everyone knows PMI, but there's a community there, right? So it's really great to have something like that, to be a part of something like that. And I am really happy to know that you are kind of leading this organization now and your vision. And it's been an incredible honor to have this chat with you. And to our listeners, whether you're running sprints in tech or building bridges in your community, AI is here and it's not the threat. As Pierre mentioned, focus on learning, the support, the community. And until next time, this is Mehnaz Talks AI. Keep building, keep believing, and stay future ready. Thank you, Pierre.
Thank you so much.